I was invited to my brother's wedding, but my wife wasn't. And now I know why. I'm a 34-year-old guy, married to my wife, Emily, for about 5 years now. Everything's been great between us, and we've always been pretty involved with my family, especially my younger brother Alex, who's 30. Alex recently got engaged to his fiancée Lily, and of course we were excited for them. I always thought Emily got along with my family well enough, nothing major that stood out. But then something happened that threw me for a loop, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. So a few weeks ago, I get this wedding invitation from Alex. I was honestly pumped. I've been really looking forward to his wedding, celebrating with family, catching up with everyone, and just being there for him. The invitation was beautiful, like one of those fancy cards with gold trim, the kind that immediately makes you realize how formal the wedding is going to be. I opened it expecting to see both our names, but nope, it was just for me. That was odd. I double-checked. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a joint invite, just my name, no mention of Emily. At first I thought maybe it was just a simple mistake, or maybe there was some sort of weird guest list issue. I didn't say anything to Emily right away because I didn't want to freak her out if it was just a mix-up. Instead, I decided to get to the bottom of it quietly. I called my mom, figuring she'd know what's going on. My mom and I are pretty close, so I thought she'd be able to clear it up easily. But when I asked her about it, she seemed off. She hesitated for a second, like she was thinking about how to answer me. Then she gave me this weird half-baked explanation about how Alex and Lily were trying to keep the guest list small and that maybe they didn't have space for plus ones. I didn't like how she said it, though. It was way too casual, like she was trying to brush it off, and honestly, it didn't sit right with me. But at the time, I just let it go. I told myself that maybe I was overthinking it and I would deal with it later. I should have trusted my gut because later turned out to be a whole mess. Eventually, I had to tell Emily about the invitation. I didn't want to hide it from her, and I figured she'd notice something was up when I didn't bring it up. So I told her. She took it pretty hard, honestly, way more than I expected. She's always been really family-oriented, and we've gone to every family event together since we got married. So not being invited to Alex's wedding felt personal to her, like she was being left out deliberately. I could tell she was hurt, even though she tried to play it off like she wasn't. I kept reassuring her that it was probably some kind of mistake and that I'd figure it out, but the more I thought about it, the more uncomfortable I got. I decided to text Alex casually, like, "Hey man, just got your invite. Wanted to check about Emily's. Wasn't sure if hers was separate or something." I didn't want to sound confrontational just in case it really was a mistake, but to my surprise, Alex didn't respond, which was weird because we talk all the time. A day or two passed with no word from him. I could feel this knot growing in my stomach. I tried not to make a big deal of it in front of Emily, but I knew something was off. The following weekend, we had this family barbecue at my cousin's place. I figured I'd see Alex there, and maybe I could talk to him in person. At the very least, I was hoping someone would bring up the wedding so I could get a better sense of what was going on. During the barbecue, I overheard my cousin chatting with someone about Alex and Lily's guest list, how strict they were being about who they invited. I wasn't even really paying attention until someone else mentioned that everyone's significant others were invited, except for Emily. That's when I started to feel that gnawing feeling again. It wasn't just some mix-up. They had deliberately left her out. I decided right then that I needed to have a serious conversation with my parents. If they knew what was going on, they were either covering it up or didn't think it was important enough to address. So I pulled them aside later that day and asked them flat out why Emily wasn't invited. My dad tried to brush it off like it wasn't a big deal, but my mom was avoiding eye contact the whole time. She kept saying things like, "It's just one day and we don't want any drama before the wedding." That was when I knew something more was going on and they weren't telling me the full story. Later that night, Emily asked me point blank what was up with the wedding invite. I didn't have the heart to lie to her, so I told her what I had heard at the barbecue and how Alex still hadn't responded to me. She was upset, obviously, but more than that, she felt singled out, like she had done something to deserve being excluded. Honestly, I didn't have any answers for her. The more I thought about it, the more I started to feel like I was missing something big. Emily wondered if maybe it was because of a disagreement she had with my mom a while back, but that seemed so minor in comparison to what was happening now. None of it made sense. The whole thing was starting to wear on both of us, and I knew I had to confront Alex directly. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about something bigger, and I needed to know what was really going on before things got even worse. Update 1. I decided to stop waiting around and reached out to Alex directly. I texted him asking if we could meet up. I told him we needed to talk about the wedding and why Emily wasn't invited. After a few hours of no response, he finally got back to me and agreed to meet later in the week. He said he'd bring Lily along too, which I was fine with. I wanted to hear her side of things anyway. The meeting was set up for a casual restaurant. I told Emily about it beforehand, assuring her that I'd figure out what was going on and fight for her inclusion. She looked worried but nodded, clearly hoping I could clear things up. She didn't want to go herself, and I didn't push her to. When I got to the restaurant, Alex and Lily were already there, sitting at a table in the corner. The atmosphere felt tense right from the start. Lily was sitting stiffly, her arms crossed, and Alex looked uncomfortable, like he didn't want to be there. There wasn't much small talk. It was clear we all knew why we were meeting. I wasted no time. I asked them straight out why Emily wasn't invited to the wedding. I wasn't looking for any excuses or deflections. I wanted an honest answer. Alex shifted in his seat, but it was Lily who spoke first. She came right out with it. She didn't feel comfortable having Emily at the wedding. Her tone was blunt, almost rehearsed, like she had been preparing to say this for a while. Alex stayed quiet, his eyes glued to the table. I was completely taken aback. I had expected some kind of explanation about the guest list, or maybe a misunderstanding, but this was something else. I pressed her for more details, and that's when she dropped the bombshell. According to Lily, Emily had made some comments at a family gathering last year, something about their relationship that deeply offended her. Lily claimed that Emily had made snide remarks and implied that she wasn't good enough for Alex. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Emily making those kinds of comments? It didn't sound like her at all. I asked when this supposedly happened, and Lily mentioned a specific family barbecue we had attended. I tried to think back to that day, but I couldn't remember Emily saying anything out of line. If anything, I remembered everyone getting along just fine. Lily, however, was adamant. She said the comments stuck with her, and that she didn't want any negative energy at the wedding. She didn't want to risk any drama on her special day. I glanced at Alex, hoping he'd step in, but he still hadn't said a word. That's when it really hit me. Alex was siding with her on this. I asked him directly if he agreed with what Lily was saying. He finally spoke up, but his response wasn't what I wanted to hear. He said that while he didn't entirely agree with Lily's view of things, he needed to support her, especially on their wedding day. He kept emphasizing that it was her day, like that justified excluding my wife. It felt like a punch in the gut. I couldn't believe my own brother was okay with this. It felt like a betrayal. I told them both that I thought they were blowing things out of proportion, that if Emily had said something, it was probably just a misunderstanding. But Lily wasn't having any of it. She said she didn't want to take the risk of any tension at the wedding. Things started getting heated. I was frustrated, and I could feel my voice rising as I accused Lily of holding on to a grudge over something that likely wasn't even that big of a deal. Lily stood her ground, though, and Alex just sat there, looking like he wanted to disappear. Then Lily said something that really threw me. She mentioned that some of the other family members agreed with her, which is why nobody was making a big deal about Emily not being invited. I couldn't believe it. I had assumed this was just between her and Emily, but now I was hearing that other people in my family were in on it too. It made me feel like I didn't know my own family anymore. I left the meeting feeling more confused and conflicted than ever. Part of me wanted to defend Emily no matter what, but another part of me started wondering if maybe she had unknowingly offended Lily. I hated that I was even questioning it, but the doubt had been planted. When I got home, I told Emily everything that happened. She was hurt, furious actually. She swore up and down that she had never said anything like what Lily was accusing her of. I believed her, but it didn't make the situation any easier. Now it wasn't just about the wedding anymore. Emily felt like she was being unfairly targeted by my family, and honestly, I couldn't blame her. Over the next few days, things were awkward with my family. Nobody brought up the wedding again, but the tension was there, unspoken. Emily started pulling back even more, avoiding family gatherings and not wanting to be part of anything involving Alex or Lily. It was starting to affect our marriage too. Emily was frustrated that I hadn't defended her more fiercely, and I was stuck in the middle, unsure of how to move forward. I knew I couldn't keep stalling. The wedding was coming up fast, and I had to decide whether I was going to attend without Emily or stand by her and risk a full-on family rift. It felt like I was being forced to choose between my wife and my family, and I didn't know if there was any way to come out of this without losing something important. Update 2. The next few days were absolute hell. I couldn't stop thinking about the wedding. On one hand, it was my brother's big day. I had been excited for this wedding for months, looking forward to celebrating with him, the family, and being a part of this special moment. But on the other hand, how could I go when Emily was being excluded like that? The idea of showing up without her, knowing how hurt she was, just didn't sit right with me. I spent a lot of time thinking things over, but I also knew I needed to talk it out with someone. So I called up my best friend Mark, who's always been good at seeing things from a practical angle. We met up for a drink, and I laid out the whole situation for him. Mark didn't sugarcoat things. He told me straight up that what Alex and Lily were doing was messed up. He couldn't believe they deliberately excluded Emily, and he made it clear that, in his opinion, I shouldn't even consider going to the wedding. Skipping the wedding is the right move, man. If you go without her, it's going to mess with your marriage, he said. He wasn't wrong. The more I thought about it, the more it became clear. If I went to that wedding without Emily, it would send the message that I was okay with her being left out, and I wasn't, not by a long shot. Meanwhile, at home, things were getting tough. Emily was really struggling with everything. One night, she just broke down. I found her in the kitchen, crying quietly, She told me how hurt she felt, how she was starting to wonder if I was really on her side. She said it felt like she was being pushed out of the family, and it was breaking her. That hit me hard. I knew things were bad, but seeing her like that pushed me to make a decision. The next morning, I sat down with Emily and told her I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to the wedding if she wasn't invited. I said it clearly so there would be no doubt. Emily looked relieved, but I could still see the hurt in her eyes. This whole thing had already left a mark on her. Even though she was glad I was standing by her, the fact that we were in this situation at all was painful for both of us. After that, I picked up the phone and called Alex. I told him straight, I wasn't coming to the wedding if Emily wasn't invited. Alex sounded stunned, like he hadn't expected me to make that choice. He started trying to talk me out of it, saying I was overreacting and that I should just come even if Emily wasn't. But I held firm. I explained that I couldn't attend an event where my wife was being deliberately excluded. It didn't matter how much I wanted to be there for him. Emily was my priority. The fallout from that phone call was immediate. First, my parents called. They were furious, saying I was causing unnecessary drama and choosing Emily over family obligations. They said I was being manipulated and that Emily was the one creating problems. I was shocked by how angry they were. It was like they couldn't understand why I was standing by my wife in this situation. My parents had always been traditional, but I didn't think they'd ever turn on me like this. I told them the truth, that Emily wasn't the source of the drama. The fact that she was being excluded from the wedding for some petty reason was the real issue. I tried to explain how hurtful it was for both of us, but they didn't want to hear it. They kept pushing the narrative that I was overreacting and that family should come first no matter what. Then Alex texted me. It was a long message full of guilt-tripping language, trying to convince me that I was ruining his wedding by making this about Emily. He told me I should just play along for the day, that it wouldn't be a big deal. But that only made me angrier. It wasn't just about the wedding. It was about the bigger picture. This was about standing up for my wife and our marriage. I wasn't going to back down just to keep the peace. Word started spreading through the extended family quickly. My aunt texted me, saying she understood my decision and supported me. But not everyone was so understanding. I got passive-aggressive messages from some cousins calling me whipped by Emily and saying I was blowing things out of proportion. It seemed like the whole family was weighing in, and most of them didn't see things from my side. It was frustrating, but I tried not to let it get to me too much. Amidst all the chaos, the one thing that kept me grounded was Emily. She told me how much it meant to her, that I was standing by her. She admitted she'd been afraid I might cave under the pressure from my family, but knowing I wasn't going to the wedding without her made her feel more secure in our relationship. It was a small silver lining in an otherwise messed up situation. In the days leading up to the wedding, the tension was thick. My parents and Alex stopped reaching out, clearly upset that I wasn't going to budge. I felt the isolation growing, but Emily was there with me, reassuring me that we were doing the right thing. We spent a lot of time together, just talking and trying to get through it. When the wedding day finally came, I won't lie, I felt guilty. I couldn't stop thinking about what it would have been like if Emily had been included. I knew my absence would be noticed, and part of me was sad that it had come to this, but I didn't regret my decision. The wedding came and went without us, and there were no updates from my family afterward, just silence. But I knew that wouldn't last. The real fallout was still coming, and I was already preparing myself for the confrontation that was sure to follow. Update 3. The day after the wedding, I was barely awake when my phone rang. It was my mom. I had a feeling this call was coming, but I still wasn't prepared for what followed. She didn't waste any time with pleasantries. Her voice was cold, sharp. "Are you happy with yourself?" That's how she opened the conversation. I could already tell where this was heading. I braced myself. My mom launched straight into blaming me for ruining Alex's big day, saying my absence was noticed by everyone. People were apparently asking why I wasn't there, and she made it sound like I had personally tarnished the entire event. She was furious, and I could hear the accusation in every word she said. According to her, I had put Emily above family and broken things apart. I asked her if she had spoken to Alex and Lily about why Emily wasn't invited. I thought maybe, just maybe, she had finally gotten the full picture. But she brushed it off, telling me it wasn't a big deal. That really got to me. I couldn't believe how easily she dismissed it, acting like the exclusion of my wife didn't matter. I snapped. I told her it was a big deal to both of us, and that it wasn't just about the wedding. It was about how my wife had been treated like an outsider for no good reason. I could feel the tension through the phone as my words hung in the air, but she didn't back down. Instead, she doubled down, insisting I had overreacted and ruined the day. Not long after, my dad called, and if I thought things couldn't get worse, I was wrong. The conversation with him was even colder. He wasn't angry, he was disappointed. He made it clear that he felt I had let the family down by not showing up, that I should have just put the issue aside for Alex's sake. It stung. He kept talking about family obligations, but I couldn't understand how he could expect me to leave Emily behind and act like everything was fine. While I was on the phone with my dad, Emily overheard part of the conversation. She had been trying to stay out of it, but this was too much. She stepped in, telling them exactly how she felt, that they had treated her like an outsider from the beginning, and that the wedding snub was the final straw. It was the first time she directly addressed them about it. I stood there backing her up, realizing how deeply all of this had cut her. I finally told my parents the truth. They had always treated Emily with this undercurrent of passive aggressiveness, and now it was clear that the wedding exclusion was intentional. I told them I wouldn't be attending any more family events until they acknowledged what they had done. It was a line I never thought I'd have to draw, but here we were. Later that day, Alex reached out. He said he was feeling torn, that he didn't think excluding Emily would cause such a massive rift. He didn't expect me to actually skip the wedding, which honestly floored me. I pointed out that it was unreasonable for him to expect me to leave my wife out of such an important event, and that I couldn't understand how he had thought that was okay. That's when Alex let something slip that changed everything. He mentioned almost casually that it wasn't just Lily who had pushed for Emily to be excluded. Our mom had also voiced concerns about Emily attending, saying she didn't want any drama at the wedding. I felt like the ground had just dropped out from under me. This whole time, I had thought the issue was between Lily and Emily, but now it turned out my own mom had been a part of it, working behind my back. I felt betrayed in a way I couldn't even put into words. I immediately called my mom to confront her. At first, she tried to deny it, but when I pressed harder, she finally admitted it. She and Lily had talked and decided that it would be simpler if Emily didn't come. She downplayed the whole thing, saying they just wanted to avoid any tension, but that didn't matter to me. It was the fact that she had schemed behind my back, that she didn't even think to talk to me about it. That was the breaking point for me. I told her straight out that her decision to go behind my back to work with Lily and deliberately exclude Emily was unforgivable. I told her I needed space and cut the conversation short. I didn't want to hear any more of her justifications. The fallout from that conversation was immediate. It sent shockwaves through the family. My dad tried to step in immediately, but I wasn't interested in talking to him unless they were ready to fully acknowledge how they had treated Emily. I wasn't going to keep brushing this under the rug just to keep the peace. Emily, on the other hand, felt both vindicated and heartbroken. She was glad I stood up for her, but the whole situation was painful. She never wanted it to get this bad with my family, and I could see how much it weighed on her. It was bittersweet. On one hand, we were stronger as a couple, but on the other, my family ties were fraying fast. Then came the social media fallout. I started noticing that some of my extended family members had unfriended or even blocked both me and Emily. It was subtle at first, but soon enough, it became clear that the divide was growing. I wasn't sure if things could ever be repaired at this point. After everything, Emily and I decided to step back from my family for a while. We needed to focus on ourselves and our marriage, to heal from the chaos. We agreed that if my family couldn't come around and treat Emily with the respect she deserved, we'd move forward without them. It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt like the only way we could move on from this mess. Update 4. After everything that went down, Emily and I decided to go no contact with my family. We needed a break, just some time to focus on ourselves and get away from all the drama. For a few weeks, things were quiet. We spent time together, trying to move past the hurt and the tension. No calls, no texts from my parents or Alex. Honestly, the silence was a relief. Then, out of the blue one evening, I got a text from my mom. It wasn't long, just a few lines. She said, "We need to talk. I'm ready to apologize." I was shocked. After weeks of nothing, here she was, suddenly reaching out with an apology. I showed the message to Emily, and we both had the same thought. Was this sincere, or just another attempt at smoothing things over without really addressing the problem? Despite my doubts, I agreed to meet her. I told Emily that I'd go alone just to hear her out, but I wasn't going to let her guilt me into anything. I didn't want to get sucked back into the family drama unless there was a real change. We arranged to meet at a small coffee shop nearby. I hadn't seen my mom since before the wedding, and I wasn't sure what to expect. When I arrived, the atmosphere was awkward from the start. My mom looked nervous, which wasn't like her at all. She didn't waste time with small talk and jumped straight into what she called an apology. She said she was sorry for how things turned out and claimed that she never meant for Emily or me to feel excluded. At first, I was hopeful, but the more she talked, the more I realized something was off. Her apology was full of if statements. "I'm sorry if you felt hurt, and I didn't mean if you and Emily thought we were leaving her out." It felt conditional, like she was trying to minimize the whole situation. The more she spoke, the more frustrated I got. I interrupted her. I had to point out that her apology didn't feel genuine. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate choice to exclude Emily, and it hurt both of us. My mom's face tightened at my words, and I could see her defenses going up. She shot back, saying she didn't want any drama at the wedding. That set me off. I couldn't believe she still didn't understand the problem. I told her that excluding Emily created far more drama than it ever could have solved. The whole mess was because they chose to push Emily out for no good reason, and now the family was fractured because of it. My mom backtracked, trying to justify her actions. She said Emily and Lily never really got along and that she was just trying to avoid tension on Alex's big day. According to her, it was all about keeping the peace. But that excuse didn't sit right with me. It was clear that she hadn't thought about how it would affect me, how leaving out Emily wasn't just about peace, it was about respect. I was getting more frustrated by the minute. Then she brought up Emily again, asking how she had reacted to everything. My mom suggested almost casually that maybe Emily was being too sensitive. That was the final straw for me. I snapped and told her straight up that Emily had every right to be upset. She had been treated like an outsider for years, and now she was being pushed out of the family entirely. Of course, she was hurt, and I was tired of people acting like it was no big deal. After my outburst, something shifted. My mom's tone softened, and I could see her start to tear up. She said she didn't realize how much her actions were hurting me. She claimed she missed me and just wanted things to go back to how they used to be. I didn't know what to believe. Part of me wondered if she was genuinely starting to understand, but another part of me was suspicious, thinking maybe she was just trying to get back in my good graces. I told her the truth. I missed my family too, but I wasn't going to sacrifice my relationship with Emily to make things go back to normal. If she was serious about repairing things, she needed to make it right with Emily. That meant giving her a real apology, not just some vague excuse about avoiding drama. I told her that until that happened, Emily and I weren't going to be part of the family. My mom seemed hesitant, but she eventually agreed to apologize to Emily. She said she would reach out, but I could tell she wasn't fully convinced. I could see it in her eyes. She still didn't fully understand the depth of the hurt she had caused. I wasn't entirely sure if her apology would be genuine or just another way to gloss over the situation. I left the meeting feeling cautiously optimistic, but also guarded. On one hand, I was glad my mom acknowledged some of the wrongdoing, but on the other, I wasn't sure if she'd really follow through. I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt, at least for now. When I got home, I told Emily about the conversation. She listened quietly, and I could tell she was skeptical too. We agreed to wait and see what my mom's next move would be, but one thing was clear: we weren't going to let ourselves get pulled back into the same patterns. If my family couldn't respect us both, we were ready to move forward without them. Update 5. A few days after my meeting with my mom, the apology came through, but not in the way I expected. My mom sent a carefully worded text to Emily. It wasn't long, just a few sentences. She apologized for any hurt caused and mentioned she hoped we could move forward as a family. When Emily showed me the message, we both knew what it was. On the surface, it was an apology, but it still felt impersonal, like my mom was just trying to check a box. There was no real acknowledgement of why this hurt us so deeply. Emily's reaction was mixed. She appreciated that my mom had reached out, but it didn't feel like it addressed the big issues. She was still being treated as an outsider, and the text didn't change that. I reassured her that we would move forward on our own terms. We weren't going to let a half-hearted apology be the end of this. If they wanted us back in their lives, it would have to be on a foundation of respect. Meanwhile, word about everything that had happened spread fast through the extended family. Gossip was flying around, and I started hearing from some cousins. Apparently, there were still people who felt like I had overreacted by not attending Alex's wedding. They thought I should have just gone, even if Emily wasn't invited, to keep the peace. But I was done tuning into that noise. These were people who didn't understand or didn't care to understand the situation. I wasn't going to let their opinions sway me. Then, out of nowhere, Alex reached out. He asked if we could meet up for drinks, just the two of us. I wasn't sure what to make of it, but after everything, I thought maybe he had taken some time to reflect. I agreed to meet him, hoping for the best, but keeping my expectations low. When we sat down together, Alex surprised me. He started by apologizing for the role he played in the wedding drama. He admitted that he should have stood up for me and Emily, but said he was trying to avoid conflict with Lily. He seemed genuinely sorry for how things had gone down, and I appreciated hearing that from him. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the damage that had been done. I told him as much, that while I was grateful for his apology, things between us weren't the same anymore. This whole ordeal had hurt our relationship. I decided to ask him about Lily. Did she have any intention of reaching out to Emily, or at least acknowledging the hurt she caused? Alex hesitated. He said Lily still felt justified in her decision to exclude Emily and didn't think she owed anyone an apology. That hit hard. While Alex was ready to make amends, it was clear that Lily wasn't. She was holding on to whatever grudge she had, and there was no sign of that changing. That conversation made me realize something important. Even though Alex might be remorseful, the root problem hadn't changed. Lily's attitude toward Emily was still the same, and as long as that was the case, I wasn't sure if things could ever be fully repaired. When I got home, Emily and I had a long talk. I asked her how she felt about continuing to interact with my family after everything that had happened. She was honest with me. She said she was willing to give them a chance, but only if they truly changed their behavior. She wasn't interested in being around people who didn't respect her, and I couldn't blame her. We had both been through enough. That was when I realized I needed to make a tough decision. I couldn't keep chasing approval or hoping for peace from my family. If they weren't willing to fully accept Emily, we couldn't keep living in limbo, wondering if the next family event would be another disaster. So Emily and I agreed to set some firm boundaries. We wouldn't attend any more family events unless Emily was invited and treated with respect. We weren't going to subject ourselves to the same passive-aggressive behavior we had been dealing with for years. It wasn't about cutting ties completely. It was about protecting ourselves and our marriage. We decided to limit our interactions with my family and focus on building a healthier, happier life together. I called my parents to let them know about our decision. As expected, my mom wasn't happy. She accused me of choosing Emily over family again, like that was some kind of betrayal. But I stood firm. I told her that we wouldn't tolerate any more disrespect toward my wife. My dad didn't say much, but I could tell he wasn't thrilled either. It was clear that this decision had created a lasting rift. My parents were hurt, and Alex seemed torn between his loyalty to me and his relationship with Lily. I could tell things were never going to be the same again. The family I once knew felt fractured, and I wasn't sure if it could ever go back to how it was before. Despite all of that, I felt a newfound strength. This experience had brought Emily and me closer together. We had been through so much, but in the end, it had solidified our commitment to one another. We weren't just surviving the situation, we were coming out of it stronger. We decided it was time to focus on ourselves and leave the family drama behind. We started planning a vacation we had been talking about for years, and even began considering the possibility of moving to a new city for a fresh start. It felt like the right time to look forward instead of dwelling on the past. In the end, I realized something important. Family is important, but the most important family is the one you build with the person you love. I knew I had made the right choice by standing by Emily, even if it meant leaving some people